Hello all, I hope you all are fine and safe and doing well with your studies. My name is Jasmin and I'm here to assist you with your English lessons. Today we are going to discuss the first chapter from your Flamingo textbook, Last Lesson, written by Alphonse Daudet. But before I begin, I would like to share something with you. During my school days, there was a fashion among some parents proudly saying that their child scores less marks in their mother tongue compared to some other languages or subjects. Even now you can see people who follow the same trend. Do you feel it's a good tendency? Certainly not. Because language or our own mother tongue is not just a medium through which we can communicate, but it is also a medium through which our culture is preserved and perpetuated. So my dear friends, I feel so privileged to discuss this particular lesson with you because it emphasizes on the deep link that exists between language and cultural identity. So now let's discuss more about the story. As I already mentioned, the story is written by Alphonse Daudet, a 19th century French novelist and short story writer. This particular story has been written in the year 1873. Do you know what is the background of the story? The story is set in the French districts of Alsace-Lorraine during the Franco-Prussian War, which was fought between France and Prussia in the year 1870 to 71. Finally, in the war, the Prussian force under Bismarck, they attacked and captured France, including the districts of Alsace-Lorraine. So the story focuses how this event affected common people, especially young students of a school at Alsace. Now let's understand more about the story. The story begins as our narrator, a young boy called Franz, rushing one day towards his school. That day he is especially anxious because he expects his stern teacher, M. Hamel, to question him as well as the entire class on participles. But our poor Franz, he hasn't learned his lesson, so he doesn't know anything about participles. Further, you can see how he is contemplating about skipping the school altogether and spending the day outside. The weather is warm and bright, the birds are chirping, the Prussian soldiers doing their drill in the open field. He is tempted by all these sights, but the very thought of his master made him rush again towards school. As he reached the town hall, he notices a huge crowd in front of the bulletin board. Then he wonders what can be the reason. Because for the past 2 years, all the bad news regarding their country used to arrive there. The battles they fought and lost, and the new orders from the commanding officers, everything. So he wonders what can be the reason now. But as he is already late to school, he decides not to stop over there and proceeds further. And on his way, he meets a person, that is a blacksmith. And he tells him that he should not rush to school as he have got plenty of time in order to reach school. But Franz, he realized that the blacksmith was actually trying to mock at him. So he did not respond to him but proceeds. Having been in such a rush, he reaches school out of breath. But suddenly he notices something strange over there. The school and its surroundings seemed really quiet that day. Usually one person arrives at that hour to school can witness lots of noise like opening and closing of desks, teachers using their rulers against the table and students reciting their lessons. But that day he felt the school is eerily quiet. Further, you can see he proceeds to a nearby window and peeps through it. And he was shocked to see Professor M. Hamel, he's already there inside the class. He was walking up and down, holding his ruler under his arm. And all his classmates were already there in their seat. Blushing with fear, he enters the classroom in front of others. But for his great surprise, Professor M. Hamel welcomes him with a very kind tone. He asks him to get inside the classroom and quickly go to his place. So Franz was really surprised with this reaction of M. Hamel. Then only he could notice that M. Hamel was on his best clothes that day. He was wearing his beautiful overcoat and a frilled shirt and a silk hat, which normally he wears on special occasions like prize distribution or any other inspection. And he was wondering what can be the reason now. And he was most surprised to see the village people inside his classroom. All of them have gathered and seated at the back of the classroom. The village people included the old man called Hauser, his former mayor and former postmaster. The old Hauser, he was sitting there with his primer. Do you know what is a primer? A primer is an alphabet book which you use in order to learn the letters of that particular language. Suddenly he felt the entire classroom, its people, everything looked really gloomy. And as he was wondering what is the reason, suddenly M. Hamel mounted the chair and announced the class in a very gentle tone that it will be the last lesson he will be presiding over, as an order has arrived from Berlin, the seat of the Prussian occupiers in the territory, that from the very next day onwards they will not be getting any French lessons, and instead only German will be taught in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. As it was his last lesson, he wanted everyone to be more attentive. It was a thunderclap for Franz, because he realized how little he knew about the French language. Even though it was his mother tongue, he could hardly write and read his language. Further, you can see how M. Hamel begins the class. He starts with a grammar lesson and he asks little Franz to recite the rule for the participles. So we already know that he hasn't learned his lesson, so he doesn't know anything about participles. Franz thought that his teacher is going to scold him, but he didn't. Instead, M. Hamel told the gathering that the parents are the most responsible for this, because they were not interested in sending their children to school in order to learn their mother tongue, but instead they were more interested in sending them to work. Further, you can see how he's describing the beauty of the French language. He tells that the French language is the most beautiful one, the clearest and most logical. He further motivates his people to learn the language and try to know more about the language, then only they can be free from the external forces. Because he believed only through language we can know more about our culture and it will unite us to fight back against our invaders. Further, you can see M. Hamel, he took a lesson in grammar. And that time, Franz was wondering how easily he could understand the lesson. Never before he was able to understand the French language and its grammar so clearly, and he felt never before his teacher explained it with such a patience. After the grammar class, they continued with a lesson in writing, where M. Hamel instructed his class to write France Alsace over and over again. And for our little Franz, he felt it was like little flags all over the classroom. Usually there used to be a lot of distractions while writing his copy. But that day, the only noise he could hear was the pen was scratching against the paper. They did the copywriting with utmost concentration. The writing session was followed by a recitation by young kids their alphabet. The old Hauser also joined with them, and that was a sight for everyone to laugh and cry. Suddenly, the church bell strikes 12. The Prussian trumpets sound, marking an end to the soldiers' drill. M. Hamel stands up, pale but tall. He begins speaking, "My dear friends," but was unable to continue. Thus, he turns against his blackboard and with a piece of chalk, in large letters he writes, "Vive la France," which meant, "Long live France." M. Hamel's inability to speak towards the end of the class shows his tumult. But in the midst of all the tumult, he manages the final act of resistance. He's trying his level best to inspire his people to fight against slavery. He motivates them to know more about their language and culture because that is the only way which can lead them to freedom. So I hope you all enjoyed this story, and we will meet again with another interesting story in the next class. Thank you.